everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alison, the online piano and violin tutor.
If the violin is shaking when you're trying to do vibrato, that is the number one sign that you are attempting vibrato too soon.
Number one, the first thing you're going to need is a violin. I have been playing the violin since I was 4 years old. I went to university and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in music.
With the amazing talent that's Alison Sparrow. Alison, come out here.
So bear with me if there are any technical hitches, I'm sure it'll be fine.
For about 5 years I was an examiner for the London College of Music. And over the years I've seen basically the music world from every kind of possible view really, and because of that it has enabled me to write my own violin course. Hello everyone, welcome. So there we go, that's kind of all you really need to know. And don't forget guys, anyone can learn to play the violin. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. It's nice to see you all again today. Hope you've all had a very good week and thank you for joining me. Should we just jump straight into it then? Okay. I can see DIY Slime Lab. Hello, Australia24. Hello, it's nice to see you all again. Kirsty, hello. Who else have we got? Oh, that's it so far. Okay. Right. I've got a question at the top of the list from Claire. I think I read your question last week actually. I'm really sorry I didn't get to answer it last week. I was scrolling through. I think I must have missed it, so I'm terribly sorry about that. I'll answer your question now though. So Claire says, I noticed that my E string is whistling quite frequently lately. Is it due to a low quality E string, cost only about a few bucks, or does it mean that it's time to change the E string? I wouldn't really say it was time to change the E string. Whistling could be a lot of things. The thing is I've never personally experienced whistling because I've never used cheap violin strings, and I would never have the means. I would never need to do anything like that, so I would never do that. So I couldn't, in all honesty, I couldn't tell you whether it is because that you've got a cheap string, although I can tell you that having a cheap string isn't going to help the situation. So if a string has a propensity to do any whistling at all, then it's going to be a cheap one. I think you've answered your own question there. I think the only way to find out is to just get a better string and then see if it's causing any whistling. It can be something to do with it can be sort of something to do with the coating. It could be to do with the bow as well. It might be a combination of the cheap string that you've got, but it also could be a combination with you not quite having enough rosin on the bow. If you think you've got enough rosin on the bow, then obviously that isn't the thing. But don't go ahead and run to your rosin now and start stuffing more rosin on the bow when that might just not be the case. But I would try and just put a little bit more rosin on the bow if you think, oh yes, I haven't actually rosined my bow in quite a while. If you rosined your bow about 2 days ago, then obviously that's not going to be the thing. But if you don't remember the last time you put any rosin on your bow, then try that first. Don't overdo it. Just as normal, just a few swipes. That's all you need to put rosin on the bow. Then try it, play for, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. Do whatever you do that you think is causing the whistling if you're playing a certain piece or whatever, and see if it causes that. But I mean, at the end of the day, you don't whistling or no whistling, I don't think you really want to be playing on strings that cost a few dollars. I have bought them in the past to put on other violins that I've got. Maybe the Fiddler Man has sent me some of his violins, and I do have a couple of those. It's always good to have spare violins. Obviously they're no match for the one that I've got for weddings, but if I'm absolutely desperate and I need a violin to play on, then I do just keep a couple up there. Sometimes I have extra violins as well if I want to put some octave strings on them, just for added variety when I'm doing recording. But I have had those strings before and they're awful. They're really, really bad. So I'm not surprised it's whistling, but I don't think it would be necessarily because the string is dead or anything. I mean, to be perfectly honest, when you're buying a string that's a few bucks anyway, the string was kind of never alive in the first place. So I would recommend that you buy something like probably you could try something by Parastro. They're a good brand. They're a very nice professional brand. I use Parastro strings. I wouldn't use anything else. D'Addario are also a good brand. But to be honest with you, because we're talking about E strings, they're not very expensive. So a very expensive E string could still be less than $10, whether you think that's kind of expensive or not. But remember, you're going to get a long time out of these. So if you can, I would try and get hold of a Parastro gold label E string. That's a very, very, very beautiful E string. I think on any violin, not just on my expensive violin, but I would put that on a student quality violin as well, because I think the E string is so important. Maybe not so much going for expensive strings on a student quality violin. I don't particularly think that is worth it, but I think you can always get away with a very nice E string. So you could try a gold label, a Parastro gold label E string, and see how you get on with that. But rosin the bow first, see if it has any effect, if it's still doing it, or just get yourself a gold label and then you can thank me later. Okay. Jazz Meat says, hi, I've been following you for quite a while because I'd bought a violin, but I never got past tuning because one of the strings snapped. Right, look, don't be afraid of tuning your violin. The reason why people snap strings on the violins is for one reason only. And that is because when you're putting the strings on, the temptation is, and this sometimes comes from guitar players, but we're non-guitar players are also guilty of it as well. But when you put a string on, you're taking a string off, whatever, you're winding it up, and what people tend to do is they get the string and they wind and they wind and they wind and they wind. They're tuning it, they're winding, tuning, winding, snap. That's why when I change a set of my strings, and I hate doing it, and I probably do it once every 9 to 12 months, depending on how much I'm playing and what time of year it is. And I obviously don't do so many weddings and things like that in the winter, but I'll probably change my strings maybe once every 9 to 12 months, depending. I hate doing it because it takes me so long. It probably takes me a good 45 minutes to change a set of strings. Yes, 45 minutes, because I take one string off at a time. It doesn't really matter which string you take off first, but if I'm replacing a whole set, I've got to psych myself up for it. It's an all-day event. So I'll take off one string at a time, and let's say I take the E string off, I'll put the new E string on, and I'll tighten the E string till it's sort of it's not loose and wobbly, but it's tight. It would be enough to hold the bridge up, and that's it. It's not in tune. It's nowhere near in tune. I don't care. Just enough so that it's tight and it's not wobbling around. And then I'll take off the A string. I'll do the same thing. I'll tighten it up until it's just sort of, the string is now straight and it's just a little bit tight, but massively out of tune. Same with the D, same with the G. So now I've got all four strings now on. They're all tight. They're holding up the bridge. I've checked the bridge. I've tilted the bridge if I need to, because the strings aren't on very, very tight, like they are now. They're perfectly in tune. Moving the bridge is a little bit harder. But because they're all just loosely tightened, if that kind of makes sense, I know that's a contradiction there, I can move the bridge. So I'll adjust the bridge is fine, and then I will get to work tuning each of the strings. But here's the difference. When I tune, I will tune one step at a time. So I'll tune from, for example, if, let me just show you, hang on a second. Let me loosen my A string. So this is... So this is where we are at the moment, and then I will tune it a little bit. So you can hear it's going up. I'll tune it a bit more. I'm turning it very, very tiny increments. And again. And again. And again. So can you see my point here? I'm not just turning this like it's a guitar tuner. I'm being very, very careful with it, and I'm turning it one little millimeter at a time. So it's going to take, that's why it takes me so long to do it. So when people tune the string, they put the string on, they tighten the string. You have to tighten the string just a little bit so it's no longer loose, but you have to leave it there. You've got to leave it sitting there for about a good 10 minutes so the string is stretched out. These strings do not like being stretched out and then immediately stretched. It's like, the strings are like, whoa, hang on a minute. it's like just moving into a house and then just shoving everything in it, or buying a house and shoving everything in it all at once. So let the strings just sit there first so that they're just gently stretching, and then you can move them a bit at a time. One thing I will never do is take it from an out of tune string straight up to the note I want to change it to. Never ever do that, because you're just yanking the string too much and it's going to break. So this is why it takes a really, really long time. If it's taking you 5 minutes to change a set of strings, then you're going to break them. So you've got to do it bit by bit. That's too high now. There we go. Sorry, I just had to put my strings back in case I need to play it later on, and my string was out of tune. So the number one reason why you're breaking strings is because you're pushing them too far. So when you're changing strings, that's what you're doing. When you're tuning strings, you're also just it's the same thing. Tuning, changing, doesn't matter. You're pushing the strings too far. So don't do that. You've got to push them in very, very, very small increments. Okay. Right. Hi, Chris. Hi, Marietta. Right. Keith, sorry. Keith, I'm struggling to master vibrato on the violin. Any useful tips would be greatly appreciated. Keith, can you expand a little bit more on that? Can you tell me a little bit what particularly? Are you having problems, actually, the movement, the speed, anything like that? Just give me a little bit more, and I'll come back to that question and answer it when you've replied. Persian, can you explain more on the rhythm timing and dotted rhythm? Again, can you just be a little bit more specific on that, as to what exactly you mean? Jasmeet, do you have videos on how to get started with the violin? I do. It depends if you're following my course or not. This course that's coming up here, it's 100% downloadable. This 1 to 30 violin course teaches you everything you need to know, from complete beginner to a decent accomplished intermediate. Links are underneath. First 10 lessons are absolutely free. Right. Sorry, I'm just having a quick read. DIY slime lab. When I do string crossings, my bow sometimes slides. How do I keep it straight when I'm playing? And also my bow grip sometimes changes when I'm playing near the tip of the bow. Any tips? Again, I'm pretty sure you asked me this question last week, or someone else asked me this question last week. When you're doing the string crossings, you have to make sure that you know where your arm is. So you have to feel where your arm is. For example, so how do you keep the bow straight? So string crossings doesn't really sort of present itself too much of a problem for me in terms of keeping the bow straight, because I feel like once your bow is sort of there, or even if your bow is there or there, you're actually just moving your arm up and down. So you're not actually moving. It's when you are actually moving the bow up and down that you need to try and keep the bow as straight as you possibly can. So I wonder if it's more just when you're crossing strings and you're bowing, I wonder whether it's more that when you're bowing, you're not straight enough, and it's got less to do with the string crossings and more to do with the actual bow straightening thing. So either way, if you want to try and learn to straighten the bow a little bit better, the best way to do that is just to practice in the mirror. That is just the easiest way of doing it. Do some mirror practice, and then what you got to do is try and feel when you're looking in the mirror and you're seeing how, whether that bow is bowing nice and straight. Then you want to start to clock with your eyes where your hand is actually going on the bow. So if you're bowing nice and straight here, you want to be clocking where your hand is going. So I can see that my hand is going there. So every time I bow, I want to bow to that point there. So you've just got to have like an imaginary spot in front of you. So after you've played in the mirror a few times, and your bow is nice and straight, yes, I'm happy with that. See where the hand stops, and you'll probably find it's some fictional kind of thing there, and then that's where you want to aim to put your hand. So that, learning the feel of where your arm is supposed to go and practicing in front of the mirror are the two main things that are going to help you bow straight. And I would imagine with the string crossings, it's probably just a combination of that, really. But with the string crossing, you're only lifting your arm up and down, so I feel like your arm isn't really going anywhere apart from kind of going up and down to change the strings. It's probably more to do with where your arm, you're not really learning where your arm is going. You're not really taking mental note of where that hand has to go to, that imaginary line that that hand has to track down to keep the bow straight. And as for the bow grip, it's something you've got to be conscious to. There's no real tip to that. It's just something you sort of have to be more conscious with. Right. I've just got my tea with me today because my throat gets really dry with all the talking. So, okay, Samya, I'm having troubles with balancing the violin on my shoulder. What do I do? Do you have a shoulder rest? There isn't really much I can say with stuff like that. It's just a case of getting what is comfortable for you. So a lot of people will have a shoulder rest. I don't have a shoulder rest because I just never have done. I don't like them. But if you can't get to grips with a shoulder rest, a cloth or a sponge or a pad or something like that underneath your shoulder. But you know, it's complete personal preference. If it's moving around, find what works best for you. A cloth folded up 4 ways, 5 ways, 6 ways, shoulder rest, different type of shoulder rest, that kind of thing. Okay. Right. Hikigaya. Hi, Alison. In the previous live session, I asked you about slurred bows. Just to update you, I've been practicing with them daily and getting a lot better than before. Fantastic. Good. That's what I like to hear. Okay. Amir, hi Alison, I recently bought your course and I'm really struggling with playing open strings, bowing with the proper angle to play the single notes. So that's going to take time. That could be something to do with the type of violin you've got as well. I hear this a lot from beginner violinists. Sometimes it's not always you, sometimes it is actually the instrument, which is why it's really important to get yourself a good quality violin. So when you are playing on, and I obviously don't know with what kind of violin you're playing on, but for example, if you are playing on a very cheap violin, you're going to find that, let's get the right angle there. So you're going to find that the bridge is not going to be tilted, not tilted, you'll find the bridge is not going to be rounded enough. So the G string, this one here, is always higher than the E string. But a lot of the times when you buy these cheaper violins, the the bridges come very flat, or they come much flatter, and sometimes they expect you to kind of be sanding them down, which is obviously not possible for most people. So you may want to take a look at your bridge and see if your bridge has a nice curve in it. That's the first thing, because if you're trying to play the violin and your bridge isn't very curved at all, no matter how much you isolate those strings, you are not going to do it. I bought a $30 violin from Amazon, which I made a video of. Some of you may have seen it on my channel. It was quite a few years ago now, but I just wanted to see what the cheapest violin on Amazon looked like. And what it played like. Suffice to say, it was pretty bad. But the bridge came unsanded. So the bridge was so flat, I couldn't isolate any of the strings. But they don't tell you that when you get them. They kind of expect you to just figure that out and do that. So if your bridge is nicely curved, then the problem is going to be you. If the problem is you, that's fine because you can fix it. If the problem is the instrument, you've got to fix that. But if the bridge is fine, problem is you, all you then have to do is make sure that you've got your arm at the correct levels for each string. So if I'm looking at my arm, this part of my arm, I'm looking at this part of my arm here. So if I'm on the A string, oh, hang on, let me move you out of the way. There we go. So if I'm on the A string here, my arm is this level. It's not there, it's not there, it's there. If I want to play the D string, my arm goes there. Not there, not there, but there. And then if I'm playing the G, it's there. Not there, not there, but it's there. If that sort of makes sense. So you've got to find the right levels. And one thing that you can do is just play through. Let me turn you down a little bit. Is to play through some of those strings. So something like... So just something like that. Just play those strings and see if you can isolate them. So do a down bow. So starting on the G string, do a down bow, down on the D string, down on the A string, down on the E string, and then up on the E string, and then up on the A, up on the D, up on the G. And then when you put that together a bit faster, so you can see each time I'm playing, my arm is moving into those 2, 3, 4. It's almost like a robot. 2, 3. My arm is clicking into each of those levels. So have a little bit of a practice on just some open strings and see if you can get faster with it and things like that. But the slower it is, the better it is, because the more control that you're going to get. And then you can isolate each of those strings, and your arm will know for next time when you've got to hit the G string, your arm's got to go there. When you hit the E, your arm's got to go there. And then eventually you'll learn that and you'll know that. So if you've just started out, don't panic yourself that you don't know where those levels are. With the violin, everything is muscle memory and everything is repetitive. So the more you do, the better you know. It's like saying, if you've lived in your house for 10 years and you had a complete blackout, would you be able to get yourself from the front door to the back end or the furthest away part of your house in the pitch black? You probably would, because you know how far it is from your front door to the living room or to the stairs or whatever, because you've been living there for so long and you've done that journey millions and millions and millions of times. So you'll eventually know where the arm has got to go. Okay. Excuse me. Right, let's move on to Elizabeth says, my right hand is so stiff to the point I almost dropped my bow. Do you have any tips on relaxing it? That's a good question, actually. A lot of people have this issue. So yes, I do have some tips for you. Let me move you in there a little bit. So if you are dropping the bow, it's probably going to be a couple of things. It's probably going to be that your bow grip is not correct. Obviously, I can't see what your bow grip is, but it could, one of the issues that it's probably not correct. Now, if you follow my videos, I'm going to assume you follow my videos and you follow my course and all that kind of thing, and you're doing the same bow hold as me. So this is the bow hold I do. So this is the bow hold I'm going to show you. So for argument's sake, I'm just going to assume you do what I do. So when you put your thumb, let's do this way. When you put your thumb in to the bit between the gap of wood that you've got, the gap of wood that you've got there between the frog and the ferrule part there, thumb goes in. Middle 2 fingers go either side of that thumb. So it's almost like the thumb is kind of poking through there. Middle 2 fingers over. But the key thing about it is that you can see my fingers are far down. They're down. They're over the hair, in other words. So they're not up here. They're not there. They're down, further down towards the hair. In actual fact, this way. Can you see like the first knuckle, sort of the first grip that I've got in here, this bit here, that is where the wood goes, in that bit there. So that's where that lays. That's how I can nicely curl. Oh, yeah, there we go. That's how I can curl over. So remember, we don't want to be holding with the fingertips. We want to be in that first kind of knuckle, if you want to call it that. Then the index finger, for me, goes in this knuckle, the second one that you've got there. So that's where the index finger wants to hold there. So you can see that that's where my first knuckle is there, and that's how it's nicely curved around. Because that's nicely tilted, it allows my little finger to just sit on top, and just when I let go here, just take the weight of the bow. So if I let my little finger off, the bow does want to drop down a little bit. Obviously, that's not a problem when you've got the bow on the violin, because the violin is taking the weight. But because we're tilting, we're just allowing my little finger there just to kind of hold on the end of the bow. And yes, my nails are long. I've just let them grow for a little bit before I cut them again. So I'm enjoying them being long for the time being, and then I'll cut them and, go round again. So that's the kind of bow grip that you're kind of looking at. So what you want to make sure is that your thumb is bent in enough. That's really, really going to help with the grip. Making sure your fingers are far enough down, not at the tips, just in that first knuckle. Tilt towards the index finger, and the little finger can just perch on top. That way, that should be quite comfortable. The key to a good bow hold is that if you feel you're going to drop the bow, you probably, it's a good bow hold. You won't drop the bow, but if you feel like this is going to kind of cause you to drop the bow, then that's good. What you're probably doing is oh, you're really locking your fingers. So when you're locking your fingers, everything is tight and nothing is actually doing what it should be doing. So when I have my bow hold like this, no one finger or thumb is working any more harder. That's terrible English. Is working harder than the rest. So my little finger is not working harder than any of the others. My thumb, they're all pulling, each one is pulling its weight. So if I let go of an individual finger or thumb or whatever, the other four pick up the slack. If I take off this, probably with the exception of my thumb, but even then I can just about do it. But I can take off any four of these fingers, any one of these four fingers, and the rest of them will pick up the slack. So that's probably what's happening. You're just not holding correctly. You're not tilting enough. Fingers aren't far enough down, and you've got a bear grip going on. If you've got a bear grip going on, even if your hand is perfect and your bow hold is perfect, if you're bear gripping it, you're not going to have any chance. But if you're holding the bow correctly, you shouldn't be bear gripping it. Okie dokie. Right, that's all gone cold now, so I'm not going to drink any more of that. Right. What else is next? Right. Hikagaya001. My question for you today is, what should be done more in practice sessions? Practicing more scales, arpeggios, slurred bows, or songs from the songbook? Practice what you need to practice, really. There is no kind of right or wrong in what you need to practice. You need to practice everything equally. I don't quite know where you are or what you're doing, but this kind of just goes for anybody in whatever they're learning, whatever stage they are. You want to have a varied practice session. So you want to be playing some pieces. Ideally, the practice session would be, you want to be playing two or three pieces, so you've actually got repertoire on the go and you're learning things via the repertoire. You probably want to have some few exercises going on. So if you're working on things like slurred bowing, martelé bowing, staccato, spiccato, something like that, a bowing technique of some sort. And then you want to be working on some technical stuff, i.e. scales, arpeggios. So you want to be sharpening up your technical skill, because the better you are at scales and arpeggios, the better player you are going to be overall. Scales and arpeggios are the building blocks of every single piece of music. So the better you are at scales and things, the better you're going to be at sheet music or playing music. So you really want to be practicing everything equally, but it just depends on what you're doing. Maybe you're okay with the scales and arpeggios that you're doing at the moment, and 10-15 minutes is enough to just kind of whiz through them to use as a warm-up. Yep, everything is great before we move on to the next step, and then you can spend more of your time working on slurred bowing. So there is no right or wrong, as long as you're practicing for a good amount of time, a minimum of around about 45 minutes, I would say. The further on you are, the more advanced you are, the longer obviously you need to practice, because the more enduring those practice sessions are going to be. But yeah, as long as you come out of the practice session and you are better than you were before you went in. I hope that helps. Right. Let's see, what else have we got? Pink TM. I'm new to playing, and my boyfriend, I think, was trying to pry the little thing open to take the string out. I wasn't sure if that was right. I'm not quite sure what you mean there. If you can just give me a bit more information on that. I'm not quite sure what part of the violin you're referring to there. Phyllis Bounds, loving your violin course. Thank you. It's amazing. I'm on the 3rd series. It's absolutely amazed at my progress. You're a gifted teacher. Oh, stop it. Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying the course. John. Oh, hi, John. Hi, Alison. Can you go over the concept of reading ahead, such as how many notes ahead to start with? When you're reading ahead, you're probably only talking about maybe a bar or a measure ahead. I'm not talking about, reading that much ahead. For example, I don't know, if I was playing this, I would easily clock these 3 notes, 1, 2, 3. So by the time I played the first one, I already know what that one is and that one is. And then I'm just ever so slightly looking ahead. So I might only be 2 or 3 notes ahead of everything. But that's all it means. It just means that you're not so focused on looking at one note at a time that the next note that you have to play is like, whoa, is like a shock to you. You don't really want to be doing that. So it's very easy to read ahead. Don't get bogged down with it. You'll probably find that you're just naturally doing that anyway. I've never really had anybody ask me about that, because it's just something that you'll be able to do. It's like asking someone, how do you breathe? You don't, I don't know. I'm just I'm breathing because I need to do it to stay alive. It's just something that you just automatically do. So don't overthink it. There's nothing clever in it. You don't have to read a whole line ahead or anything like that, because you're just not going to memorize that whilst you're trying to focus on what you're doing. You're trying to look ahead. You're trying to get the right notes. There's so much going on, but just as long as you are a couple of 3 notes ahead, that's more than necessary. Hi, Katie. Hope you're well. Okay. Pink TM. Do you have to eventually take the strings off the bow? Asking because the violin I'm playing is the old violin. If you're talking about the hairs on the bow, you don't really need to get those replaced unless you've got a very expensive, a nice advanced bow that does need to be kind of upkept. So you don't need to really change those. If you are talking about the actual strings on the violin, and you've got an old violin and you don't really know when the strings were changed, I would just change them, because they do oxidize over time anyway, so you're not going to get the best sound out of it. So I would just, if it were me, I would just eventually at some point just get a new set of strings, especially if you don't really know the history. Okay. How are we doing for time? We're okay. Let's answer a few more. Okay, Irene. I find myself using the top half of my bow more. I feel like I have less control when I use the lower half closer to my hand. Is this something I can work on, or is it my bow? No, that's actually a good question. I don't think so. I think with most of the music that we tend to play, we are going to be staying more in the half to top half of the bow. It isn't really very often that we need techniques down in the lower half of the bow. So when I'm playing, I'm probably playing up to about there. If I was just playing a piece of music, I'd probably start around there. So I'm not, where's halfway? So that's about halfway. So if that's, I don't know if you can see that. Let me move it there. So that's halfway, but that doesn't feel right to me. This feels more natural to me. So I am more, let's do it that way so it's flat. So I'm more there. So it's just, there's half, there's just under half, or just over halfway closer to my hand. So that's about as low as I tend to go if I'm just playing and I'm not doing any particular technique. If I picked up this and I was just playing from this, for example, then I would probably just be playing in the middle half of the bow. So for me, that would count as anywhere from there to about there. So that's it. So I don't really use the top portion of the bow very much, and I don't really use the lower portion of the bow very much, but that's completely normal unless you are playing something very loud and you want a lot of bow, or the notes are very long, then you would have occasion to go all the way to here and all the way to the end. But if you are just merrily playing away, let's say, then yes, you're probably going to be using more of the middle-ish, just slightly below middle to the top half anyway, and that's completely normal because it feels normal in the hand, and it's a nice area of the bow to play in when you are just playing, no technique, just merrily playing away, if you want to think of it like that. So that's fine. Hi Tracy. Okay, Marissa. Hi Alison, I'm new, so sorry if this has been asked previously, but I picked up a violin 3.5 months ago and I'm taking to it rather naturally. However, I have weak wrists from my line of work, so I'm finding it easier to play while bracing with my wrist. I'm trying not to, but keep reverting back. Any tips on getting away from this? That's a bit of a tricky one because that kind of ventures into more hand therapy and things like that. It's not a particular area of expertise because I'm a music teacher, I'm a musician, I'm not a hand therapist. That would probably be something that a hand therapist specifically would be able to help you with, because it'll be to do with the muscles in the wrists and all that kind of thing in your wrist. I mean, Obviously, depending what you're doing, if you're probably not so much, if you're talking about your left arm isn't really, or your left hand, left wrist isn't really moving too much. It's pretty much sort of static on the violin, but it would probably count more on the wrist when you're using the bow. I don't see any reason why you can't have a wrist brace on if you think that's helping you, as long as it wasn't particularly hindering you being able to move your bow. If you were able to move your wrist, if you were just having to move your arm and this wrist wasn't moving at all, then you might find that you'll just come a little bit unstuck later down the line. But if you are unable to not have your wrist braces on when you play, and that's going to cause you problems, then that's sort of a whole set of issues. So, that would be something that a professional, someone who does that, would be able to help you with, rather than probably someone like me. But if it's not I don't see why you can't play with a wrist brace on for the time being, at least, anyway. Right. So what else have we got? Kirsty, ask Olaf the violin maker can answer for repair and fixing the violin issues like smoothing the fingerboard here on YouTube. Okay. I haven't seen any of his videos. I will have a look. Okay. What else have we got? Chef Tufabulous. Sorry, my terrible pronunciation there. Jeff Tufabulous. Hi Alison, how do I know if I need to use a top part of the bow, or is it just personal preference? As I said previously, you probably just want to be using sort of the middle part of the bow. You're not really using, there's no real technique that's going to use the top half of the bow. The further towards the point of the bow, i.e. here, the further towards here you are, the less control you're going to have. The further towards the heel of the bow where your hand is, the more control you're going to have. So unless you are, you just want to be using most of your bow really, but you don't really want to be using the sort of the top half of the bow unless you are trying to use sort of long bows. But there's no reason why you would particularly need to be there. If you were doing something, if you were playing in an orchestra maybe, and you were doing some sort of tremolo-y type thing, but even then you're going to be let's do it here so you can see. Even then you're going to be here. You're not really going to be so much there because there's not enough control there. So you're going to be in the top portion, but so only if you were doing something like that would be one of the only reasons, if not the only technique or the only kind of thing that you'd be playing, that you would need to play more in the top half of the bow. But you'd want to keep it around the middle to top half, I would say. Okay. Right, a few more minutes. Anne Mole, hello, I haven't seen you in a while. How are you? When performing an up bow with pressure, from where do you draw the strength from? Is it entire wrist, or is it the entire hand, or is it the shoulder? That depends on what you're doing and where it's coming from and what you are trying to achieve with it. I think when you're playing, it's probably going to be a combination of playing the power coming from the whole top part of the arm, from the elbow to the shoulder. I don't think it's really going to be in the shoulder. I wouldn't want to say the power is coming in from the shoulder, because you're kind of propelling off a little bit too much. But it's going to be more the top part. I would say it's probably going to be more of the top part of the arm. If you wanted to sort of have a good up bow and you wanted to have a good force of the up bow, the power isn't really coming from the hand when you're doing things like that. The only time the hand really gets involved in that kind of thing is if you are doing particular techniques with the bow. If you're doing spiccato or kind of martelé bowing, then the fingers, wrist, hand are going to be getting involved. But I guess if you want to power your way into the note, you're going to be looking at not just shoulder, but I would say the top portion of this arm, because that is kind of what's moving. I guess you could argue that your shoulder is the thing that's moving, but I would say I feel the force more from the bicep-y kind of area, not sort of just here, if that kind of makes sense. pink TM. It doesn't look like that there's much hair on the bow that I have. If you are playing with an older violin, then you may, and you know it's worth something, then it may be worth getting your bow rehaired. When you don't have enough hair on the bow, you just can't get a nice sound out of it. You're kind of, the bow is the one thing that makes the sound, not the violin. The violin will make a sound, but it will only make a sound when you put something on it to make said sound, i.e. the bow. So if you're only playing with half the amount of hair on your bow, then you're going to get half the amount of sound. And not only that, you'll probably find that the bow will be quite unbalanced as well. So you're not going to be able to play, when you're playing flat, it'll be very difficult to do that because you're only playing with half the amount of hair. Whereas I've got a good centimetre, let's say, of hair, or a good 10 millimetres, maybe a tiny bit longer of hair here. And if you're only playing with half of that, you've only got half of that to play with. So it's just, it'd be like walking along a tightrope. So it may be worth getting it rehaired if you know that the bow it has a value to it. If not, just buy it might be worth the money that you're going to spend rehairing it. It might just be worth buying a new bow. What do I do when a few of my strings are broken? Get new strings. just no choice but to replace them. Okay, I'm just going to answer a couple more and then we will end. The wrist is struggling with the string wrist. The wrist I'm struggling with is the Marissa. So yeah, going back to the wrist thing, the wrist I'm struggling with is the string wrist. So okay. So if you're talking about that, I don't think there's going to be any issue with playing with a brace that you've got there. I think that'll be fine because you're not moving that. You might just find vibrato a little bit trickier, but if you've only just started, that isn't going to be a problem at this point anyway. And what else have we got here? I'm trying to answer I'm just trying to answer as many as I can. Addendum to my previous message. Phyllis Bounds says, I'm 68 years old and I've never touched a violin until I was 60, so it's never too late. Found your tutorials far better than private lessons and cheaper. Well, yeah, it is never too late to play the violin. And yeah, I'm glad that you found my lessons very helpful. That's good to know. Kathy, I'm having the same problem as Abjit, shakes and bounce of my bow. When your bow is shaking, it just could be a couple of things. It could be that more often than not, it could just be that your bow is a little bit too tight. So just loosen the bow a little bit and see if that helps. What else have we got? Why Purging says, why does the string in the third position sound different from the first position? Just purely because it's higher up the fingerboard. So when you're playing in first position, it's just because the string is much lower down and it's much lower down on a more resonant part of the violin. When you're playing up high, you're cutting off the string. So when you're playing up higher, the string it just has a different texture because it's being pushed down at different places. It's being pushed down from different heights as well. So it always sounds a little bit more muted because of simply because of the way that it's much higher up. Katie, Alison, you missed that one. How to do the spiccato or staccato in the Neapolitan song during the semiquaver part, bar 1 and beyond. Now, Neapolitan one, are you talking about? That's my violin duets. These ones, violin 1. So yeah, I have a 10 violin duets book that I've done, and you can duet with me or you can duet with someone else or whatever. But depending on what part you get it all. Depending on what part you can duet, there's piano parts to all of them. There's violin parts for all of them as well. So if you want to play the second violin part, you can play with me who's playing the first violin part as well, and all this kind of thing. All the links are in there. Let me just find what we're referring to. How to do the spiccato or staccato in the Neapolitan song, bar 41. Right, so bar 41 is... So this is what we're looking at here. So when you have two. So when you have these, so these are semiquavers or 16th notes, and you've got two notes. Da 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 da. You're going to be doing down, down, up, down, up. So it'd be something like. One second, let me show you. Okay. So what you're going to be doing there, sorry, my A string's out of tune. When you're playing those notes, you're going to be doing down and then up. Stay near the heel of the bow. And then when you're playing the up bows, you want to give them a slight kind of going round in a circle. So give a little bit of air. So, oh, sorry. You don't want to keep the bow intact on the string. So down, up, down, up. Does that help that little part there? It's actually it's much easier to play than you think it is, but you've got to stay at the heel of the bow, and when you're doing the two up bows, your bow is going round in circles. You're just flicking the bow up, back down again, flicking the bow up and back down again. Okay, right. I'm going to stop it there. Any questions I haven't answered, I'm really, really sorry. But this video, we could just go on forever with this video, and I don't want to make these too long. So, if you have any questions that you desperately wanted an answer from me now, write them in the write them in the comment box underneath this video, and I'll answer your question there. If not, we will do another live again next week, and you can put your questions onto next week, and I'll try to answer them there as well. But I'm really sorry if I haven't got around to answering your questions. I'm trying to answer as many as I can, as thoroughly as I can, because I know you guys don't have access to teachers or anything like that. So I don't want to sort of half-ass the answers to you. I want to give you the answers that you want, so you can move on to the next stage. So again, apologies for not answering any questions. Write them down in the comments underneath if you want me to give you an answer, and I reply to you that way. Thank you very much for joining me. All the links to my books and everything are going to be, the course, for those of you that don't know, are going to be underneath this video. And I will see you all same time next week for another Q&A live session. Thank you all very much, and I will see you all then. Bye.